Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today, Plun just filed an 8K reporting their initial public offering details, and I am seeing a very common SPAC pattern emerging. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. This filing gives us a lot of insight into how the company is structured and how it went public, which is super important for understanding its future. Alright, let's dive into what Plutonian Acquisition Corp II, or PLUN as it trades, has reported. This is a Form 8, which is basically a report for significant events that occur at a company for PLUN. The big event is the successful completion of their initial public offering, or IPO. This means they started selling their shares to the public for the first time. The filing tells us that the registration statement for their IPO was declared effective by the US Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, on the 27th of April 2026. Then, just a couple of days later, on the 29th of April 2026, they actually closed the IPO. They offered 10 million units, and each unit was sold for $10. This is a pretty standard structure for special purpose acquisition companies, or SPACs. Each unit is made up of one share of their Class A ordinary stock and one right. Now, what is a right? Well, this right essentially gives the holder the option to buy a fraction of a Class A ordinary share later on, specifically when the company completes what they call an initial business combination. Think of it as a little extra sweetener for investors. So, with 10 million units at $10 each, they raised a cool $100 million before any fees or expenses. The filing lists the securities that are now trading on the New York Stock Exchange, or NYSE. You've got the units themselves. Trading under the symbol PLUN, then there are the Class A ordinary shares, PLUN, and the rights. PLUNer, it is important to understand these different components because they can behave differently once trading starts. The units, for instance, usually trade for a bit and then they split, and you are left with the separate shares and rights. Here is a common checkbox. Plutonian Acquisition Corp II is declaring itself an emerging growth company. This is a designation that allows newer, smaller public companies to have a bit of breathing room when it comes to certain reporting requirements under the law. They can delay adopting new accounting standards, for instance. This is typical for SPACs right after they go public. Many companies elect not to use the extended transition period for new accounting standards, and PLUN is doing the same here. This section lays out the key agreements that were put in place for the IPO. These are the behind-the-scenes deals that make the IPO happen. We see an underwriting agreement with AGP/Alliance Global Partners, which is essentially the investment bank that helped them sell the shares. Then there is a rights agreement detailing how those rights we talked about will work. There is also a letter agreement involving the sponsor, which is the group that initially formed the SPAC, along with early shareholders and company officers. This shows that BT LLC was involved as a representative of the underwriters. This is standard practice for an IPO where an investment bank manages the sale of shares to the public. This one is particularly important for SPACs. This agreement sets up a trust account where the money raised from the IPO is held. The funds in this trust are meant to be used for acquiring a target company. Generally, this money is only released to the company to fund a business combination or to return to shareholders if no deal is made within a specific time frame, usually 18 to 24 months. The filing mentions that as of the 29th of April 2026, a total of $100,500,000 from the IPO and a private placement was deposited in this trust account. That is slightly more than the gross proceeds from the IPO, which hints at a small private placement component. This part talks about a private placement that happened at the same time as the IPO. The company sold an additional 210,000 units called private units to the sponsor. These were also sold at $10 per unit, bringing in another $2.1 million. These private units are pretty similar to the ones sold to the public, but they come with some important restrictions, like not being able to sell them for a period after the IPO, usually until 30 days after the company completes its first business combination. This is a way for the sponsor to show commitment to the venture, and they get certain registration rights in return, meaning the company will eventually have to register these shares so they can be traded. The key here is that these were issued under a specific exemption in the law. Section 4(2) of the Securities Act, meaning they were not offered to the general public, which is typical for private placements to a sponsor or a small group of sophisticated investors. This section announces changes in the company's leadership. Effective the 27th of April 2026, 3 new individuals were appointed to the board of directors: Aaron Vahanian, Hao Shen, and Joel A. Gallo. This is a fairly common occurrence when a company goes public. The filing notes that details about their backgrounds and any compensation arrangements are in the registration statement. It also confirms they entered into the letter agreement and an indemnity agreement, which is standard practice to protect directors and officers. This simply states that on the 27th of April 2026, the company adopted its amended and restated memorandum and articles of association. This is essentially their updated corporate rulebook, which is necessary to reflect their new status as a publicly traded company following the IPO. This item is for any other material information that doesn't fit neatly into the other categories. Here, P.L.U.N is reporting that they issued press releases announcing both the pricing of their IPO on the 27th of April and the closing of the IPO on the 29th of April. These press releases are attached as exhibits to this filing. It is common for companies to issue press releases to let the market know about major events like an IPO. Here we see the list of exhibits, which are the actual documents that support the information in the 8K. We've got the underwriting agreement, the amended and restated memorandum and articles of association, the rights agreement, various agreements with the sponsor and early investors, and importantly, the 2 press releases. There is also an exhibit for the cover page formatted in inline XBRL, which is a standard for electronic filings. Finally, we have the signatures. This part confirms that the company acknowledges the accuracy of the information provided in the report. It is signed by Wei Kwang Ng and dated the 30th of April 2026, indicating this is when the filing was officially submitted. So, what is the story here? Plutonian Acquisition Corp II has successfully completed its IPO, raising $100 million. They've put most of that money into a trust account, typical for a SPAC. This means the company is now publicly traded and is on the clock to find a business to merge with. The pattern is very familiar. SPAC goes public, raises money, gets listed, and then starts the search for an acquisition target. The success of P.L.U.N will now depend entirely on finding a suitable company to merge with that can create value for its shareholders. The key risk, as with most SPACs, is that they might not find a good deal, or the deal they do find might not perform well after the merger. Many SPACs have historically seen their stock prices decline significantly after the merger. The company has just laid the groundwork for its operations as a public entity, and the real work of finding and executing a merger is just beginning. The risk I am watching is the typical SPAC post, merger performance, which has historically been quite weak for many companies that go public this way. Oh, and the research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. That is my take. Stay decoded. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description.